Hi everybody. So in today's video, I'm going to be lamenting about the heaviness that I feel, not only as a trauma survivor who has experienced really damaging and devastating harms in my most crucial formative developmental years, but also as a witness of all the suffering in the world, all the suffering, wrongdoing, evil, harm, injustice in the world. And I feel so heavy because of all these things that are happening in the world, as well as the things that have happened in my life. And I know that I'm not the only one who feels this way. I know that many of us trauma survivors also feel this way, and we have an increased awareness of how awful this world can be, how dangerous this world can be, how broken this world is because of our own personal experiences and also our observations of the world around us. There are so many events in the world that break my heart and grieve me, and that I find so vexing to my spirit every day. And even if I were to avoid the news, just going out and looking around, I see the injustice, I see the greed, I see the inequality, the suffering, so much suffering. And while I don't want to be negative, I also know that there is a freedom in saying the truth as it is, saying things like it is, if that's how the saying goes. Saying things as it is or saying things like it is. Well, you guys know what I mean. I think there's a freedom in acknowledging these things, and there's even more freedom when someone else says these things and validates how we feel and validates the heaviness that we feel. And somehow, just that small act alone is sometimes enough to make us feel a little bit lighter. Obviously, we'll still probably feel quite heavy because these issues are still so pervasive and ongoing. But the fact that other people see and are grieved alongside is very comforting. And something that I've struggled with in my social circles recently is that it's really hard to find people who are grieved about these things on the same level as I am. And not even anywhere close, like there are so many of my peers who grew up having pretty conventional lives, have never gone through extreme trauma, have never experienced that deep pain. I mean, I'm sure they've gone through hardships as well because life is not easy necessarily for anyone and it has trouble for everyone. But they've been significantly comparatively sheltered and privileged in some ways. And I look at how they're living their lives currently, and I just feel like it's so out of touch. And maybe it's not my place to judge them. And judging them is not even really my intention either. I'm just kind of evaluating what I'm observing. And the way that they live life is just as conventional as their upbringing and their life experiences have been. And they're not thinking deeply about the existential suffering in the world. Many of them are doing the standard thing of getting married, having children, buying a house, one day probably sending their kids to kindergarten and then school, and setting their kids up for a pretty conventional life, working a 9-to-5 job, contributing to this economy, serving the system. And I feel so alone and isolated, when the people around me are living such a different reality. And so, just like the name of my podcast, I hope that this video, as heavy as it is, will actually ironically lighten some of you guys' load, and that it will be a breath of fresh air. And that's why I called the podcast this, because I want to speak things that are true. I want to validate you guys' experience, your view of the world. And so often we get dismissed, gaslighted, told that what we're seeing is not true, told that we're just viewing things through a lens of trauma, made to feel like there's something wrong with us. When in actuality, even though we are damaged and broken by harms inflicted on us, and perhaps our worldview is impacted by hypervigilance or even structural changes in our brain, like an overactive amygdala for some people, because we've lived under threat for so long and we've never been able to rest and just breathe easy and just be. Even though these things do impact our worldview, I will say that for many of us trauma survivors, we have a very realistic and rational view of the world. The people who deny what we see simply have not contacted how brutal this world can be. They simply have not contacted the brutal realities of this world. And there's no guarantee that they will never contact these realities. Life can throw anything at anyone. I mean, even the people who are having children, who knows if their child is going to be born with a lifelong incurable disease, or a lifelong impediment, or a lifelong disorder that is going to make them dependent on care for the rest of their lives. And when mom and dad are gone, who's going to care for the child? I think a lot of people who have been sheltered and privileged in this life, they have a false sense of security in how merciful life will be to them. They don't know how brutal it can get. And for many of us, we know how brutal it can get. And I was just watching a video of a psychologist. I think he's an Australian psychologist. It's my first video I've ever seen of him. But I think he was at a conference or something, and he was giving a talk on how he counseled survivors of torture in war. Wartime torture. And I was just so grieved, and I felt so heartbroken and so heavy at all these evils going on in the world that we are helpless to. So many of us are powerless in a way, and I think that is part of the trauma. The fact that we are kind of at the mercy of other people or systems that are evil, foolish even, and dangerously foolish, that lead us into harm, that inflict harm on us, that put us in impossible situations, that cause us great suffering, torment, torture. And my heart is broken. And I don't mean to sound melodramatic as I say these things. Maybe for some people, especially those who are more privileged, they might hear all of this and think, wow, she sounds so melodramatic. But no. If you really stop and think about all the horrors that are going on in the world and all the people who are suffering and helpless in their suffering, powerless to ultimately be free from that suffering, even if they may have some agency and some choice, ultimately, there is a powerlessness that so many sufferers experience because the ones who are in power, and I'm not talking about the government necessarily, I'm talking about whoever has power over their life, and it could be a parent who has significantly more power than a child who is vulnerable, defenseless, young, inexperienced, naive, trusting. How much more vulnerable and powerless that child is compared to the parent who is an adult, bigger, stronger, more experienced in life, perhaps more manipulative. And also that in parent-child relationships, there's an attachment bond that can be very easily exploited if a parent does not truly have the child's best interest at heart and is using the child in some way or had the child for some selfish reasons and withholds compassion from the child. But besides this parent-child example, there are so many other dynamics in this world where the powerful one causes harm and suffering to the one with less power. And it breaks my heart. Even as I say this right now, I'm typically someone who is quite emotionally, I'm not really sure what the word is. I am an emotional person, but I think I'm also pretty rational, but as I say this, I'm really feeling the emotional pain of thinking about these things and just being so grieved. It's a grief, I'm just so grieved in my heart. My spirit is vexed, and yeah, I was kind of almost at like a loss for words there. I don't even know how to articulate and convey it, but I know that there are people listening to this right now who understand. Whether you've been abused as a child, abused in a relationship or a marriage that you thought you could trust, whether you've been betrayed or harmed in the workplace, whether you're struggling with poverty, that you know that even if you worked hard, and maybe you've even already tried to work hard, the greed of those in power make it very hard for you to even survive with a decent amount of security and comfort. There are so many cases of harm, and I'm also thinking of people who are involved in war right now. And it's very, very sad. And so one way that I process this deep grief for me personally, because it's so deep and it's such a deep existential grief, I can't just handle it through philosophy alone or through logical reasoning. Something that has helped me has been my Christian faith. And I know that Christianity has a horrible reputation right now, and I don't blame people for being put off by Christianity. I just want to say that, a lot of the loud, dominant, possibly even kind of oppressive voices that claim to be Christian and try to dominate society, I personally don't identify with them or relate to them. And when I look at the Bible, I find it hard to confidently claim them as one of us, if that makes sense. And yeah, their existence in this world and the way they influence this world, possibly for the worst, even though some of the things that they believe are valid, some, not all. Their ultimate impact on this world, I don't know, like I just don't feel at peace with it. It seems more negative to me. And personally, I know that God knows each person's heart, and He knows the true nature of each person, and I trust Him to handle that and handle the ones who are causing harm in the name of Christianity, especially, who mischaracterize and misrepresent God to people, push people away from God, when actually there are so many people in need who could benefit from understanding God as He truly is. And I don't even claim to know God as He truly is. But I've read enough of the Bible to know a couple things about God, and I know how essential love is to Him. The Bible has many verses that I deeply appreciate, like, for example, love does no harm to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law. Or love your neighbor as yourself. And actually, those are the two greatest commandments in the Bible. Number 1, love God. Number 2, love your neighbor as yourself. And then 1 Corinthians 13 is a famous passage that, many people have heard of, even if they're not Christian. But it talks about how love never fails and how love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no account of wrongs. And on that note as well, I want to make a caveat. When I say it keeps no account of wrongs, I don't mean in cases where like you're being abused and harmed and you should keep an account of wrong so that you can get out of the situation, as in be aware of the wrongs that are done to you rather than just dismissing everything and sweeping it under the rug and pretending it doesn't happen. No, you should be aware of those wrongs. You should observe if there's a pattern of harm and you should get yourself out of the situation to protect yourself. Which is probably what you would do for someone you care about, and in that sense, like if you would love your neighbor as yourself, you should also protect yourself. If that's what you would wish for someone else, to protect them in an objectively harmful and persistently harmful situation. I think what it means here by keeping no account of wrongs is a bit more nuanced, but point is, that famous passage, right? Love is patient, love is kind. It's not rude, it's not proud, it is not self-seeking. It does not boast. It is not easily angered. And how many parents in this world are so easily angered and uncompassionate towards their children? There's even a verse in the Bible that goes, as a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion, blah, 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 blah. But notice the first part, as a father has compassion on his children, it is expected of fathers to have compassion on their children. That should be the natural thing. And yet, there are so many people who are not that. And I just want to say as well, if anyone is on my channel for the first time, I try to make this disclaimer in every video. This channel is meant to be a safe place for people of all belief systems and philosophies. I am a Christian and I talk a lot about my own belief system because it has helped me. But I talk about it with sensitivity because it has also, at one point, harmed me in the past. And I had religious trauma. I left the church for a couple years. So I understand that part as well. Like, I understand that experience as well because I've experienced it and lived through it. And my formative years were full of people mischaracterizing and misrepresenting Christianity to me. And I know the harms that unqualified teachers can do. And some of these unqualified teachers are straight up false teachers. Some of them are wolves in sheep's clothing, as the Bible warns, as Jesus in the Bible himself also warned. And some of them are just misguided, and then they teach things that are not true on the pulpit. And then their followers parrot those false teachings, parrot those false ideas. And every time something is false instead of true, it's going to cause harm. Sometimes they misapply scripture and harm the most vulnerable, wounded, traumatized people by misapplying scripture and applying an inappropriate scripture to the wrong context. And as someone who has been so harmed, I have a lot of sympathy for people who are hurt by Christianity, harmed by Christianity, traumatized even by Christianity, which I too was at one point. I was psychologically traumatized and tormented by it. And so my heart is still also for these people, even if they might not be Christians now. Like, if they've been harmed and hurt by Christianity and it angers them to hear things about Christianity, I feel you. And I'm in no way trying to push or pressurize anyone into adopting my belief system. And anything that I share is just meant to be validating and comforting, because I think there are many philosophical concepts in Christianity that acknowledge suffering, acknowledge evil in this world, and doesn't downplay it, doesn't dismiss it. And so I find that it can be very validating. So that's why I share these things, and it's definitely not to proselytize, it's not to convert people, it's not to pressurize people, or it's not that. And I think the more you guys listen to my videos, the more that will become clear. What I intend to do is to just validate our experiences of the world, because interestingly, the Bible has quite a lot of things that are quite validating. when it comes to people who have been harmed, victimized, traumatized. I actually have a bedtime story that I would have likely posted by now before I post this video. You can go check that out. It's a bedtime story on the parable of the Good Samaritan. And a parable is just a story. It's a story that Jesus told about the Good Samaritan. For those of you guys who know the story, because maybe you had a Christian background or Christian upbringing, you would know that it's about a man who was victimized. He was legitimately victimized, harmed by a robber. He did nothing to deserve that harm. He was harmed by a robber who robbed him and then left him for dead on the roadside. And in this parable, there were people who passed this injured guy by, meaning they ignored him. They were walking down the road, they saw him, they crossed to the other side of the road, and they just went on their way without offering any help, without checking in on the person, without leaning in, without asking if they were okay, without trying to help. And then there was one Good Samaritan who stopped and used his own resources, his own donkey, his own money, his own wine to help this guy who was injured. I think the alcohol was probably used to treat his wounds. I'm not very sure. But yeah, he used some oil and some wine because this was ancient times, right? And this situation of the Good Samaritan didn't actually happen. It was a parable or a story that Jesus told to illustrate what it means to really love your neighbor as yourself. And who was the man who really loved his neighbor as himself? It was the Good Samaritan. It wasn't the people who ignored the injured man in front of them and passed him by without even a single care. Or maybe they cared, but for some reason they didn't stop, right? We don't know what their inner state was, but they definitely did not care enough to stop for him. But going back to what I was talking about at the start of this video, I was talking about how there's so much suffering, evil, injustice, harm, awfulness in the world. And I want to read a couple things for you guys. These are some of my favorite passages from the Bible. And what's interesting is that you can understand these in a philosophical way, even if not a religious one. So I hope that this will bring some ease to you guys, that will help. I hope they'll help you breathe a bit easier, because you're like, oh wow, someone else also sees this reality and vindicates it, and I can't think of the word, but yeah, someone else also sees this reality, acknowledges it. I think there's such power in acknowledging something, or rather there's such power in hearing someone else acknowledge the same truths that you see and experience, especially if these are truths that are often dismissed or ignored, or simply kind of you're left to be isolated in them because other people with a more privileged life don't understand and have never thought that deeply about these things because they've been so sheltered. So I just want to read one of my favorite passages from Ecclesiastes 4, which is interestingly kind of like a philosophical book in the Bible. It was written by a very wise king, one of the wisest kings to ever live. This was an actual historical figure. I mean, people believe it was written by this king, King Solomon, but I don't know if that's been 100% proven. It may or may not be. I don't know, because I'm not a Bible teacher, but I'm just going to be reading these passages. So I won't be teaching anything because I'm not qualified to. I won't be interpreting anything. I'm just going to read a bunch of passages. So Ecclesiastes 4. And the title in this NIV version, or the New International Version that I'm reading, is called Oppression, Toil, Friendlessness. Now start reading now. Chapter 4. Again I looked and saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead, who had already died, are happier than the living, who are still alive. But better than both is the one who has never been born, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. And I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. Again I saw something meaningless under the sun. There was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil. Yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless, a miserable business. Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And there's a little bit more for this chapter in Ecclesiastes 4, but it kind of changes the topic slightly, so I won't be reading the next part. But now I'll be reading some psalms that are kind of like psalms of a person in sadness and in grief. So, Psalm 10. Why, Lord, do you stand far off? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? In his arrogance, the wicked man hunts down the weak, who are caught in the schemes he devises. He boasts about the cravings of his heart. He blesses the greedy and reviles the Lord. In his pride, the wicked man does not seek him. In all his thoughts, there is no room for God. His ways are always prosperous. Your laws are rejected by him. He sneers at all his enemies. He says to himself, nothing will ever shake me. He swears, no one will ever do me harm. And by the way, guys, I know I said I wouldn't teach, but I just want to chip in and add one point. I just want to chime in and add one point out of sensitivity and consideration. So I know that in one of the verses, it was talking about how this wicked man in his pride does not seek God. In all his thoughts, there is no room for God. I will say that I don't think that this applies to people who have gone through so much suffering and who are so grieved by the evil in the world and the problem of evil and the problem of suffering in this world, to where they start to question, is there a God? And then some of them become atheists because they simply cannot reconcile what we experience in this world with a loving and just God. I don't think this verse necessarily applies to those situations. I have a lot of compassion for those kinds of people. I think this verse is talking about people who are so arrogant that they are godless. Like godless in the sense of like they have no fear of God, they have no sense of accountability towards a higher power, and therefore, this is the most important part. Therefore, they harm other people brazenly. They harm other people with no fear of having to give an account to God for how they treated God's fellow creations, or rather how they treated their fellow human beings and God's creations. So I think that's what it means, and I just wanted to chime in and clarify that so that people here who maybe don't believe in God don't get offended thinking that, this verse is against them, because I don't think it applies to that. I think it's applying to harmful, evil people who are godless and don't think about God or how he might have to give an account to God one day for how he treats his fellow human beings or neighbors. As the Bible says, like, love your neighbor as yourself. Anyways, going back to where I left off, he says to himself, nothing will ever shake me. He swears, no one will ever do me harm. His mouth is full of lies and threats. Trouble and evil are under his tongue. He lies in wait near the villagers. From ambush, he murders the innocent. His eyes watch in secret for his victims. Like a lion in the cover, he lies in wait. He lies in wait to catch the helpless. He catches the helpless and drags them off in his net. His victims are crushed. They collapse. They fall under his strength. He says to himself, God will never notice. He covers his face and never sees. And just to chime in again, because I'm kind of reading from a written text and it's a bit harder to be clear in an audio format since this is a podcast. When he says that he covers his face and never sees, he's referring to God. Like, so this person is actually speaking, this like evil man is saying to himself, God will never notice, he covers his face and never sees. He's thinking that God covers his face and never sees. And so he doesn't expect any accountability or reckoning from God. And I'll continue reading the passage now. I'm at verse 12. Arise, Lord, lift up your hand, O God. Do not forget the helpless. Why does the wicked man revile God? Why does he say to himself, he won't call me to account? And again, I'm just going to chime in. When it says he won't call me to account, it's like God won't call me to account. So yeah, again, it's kind of tricky to like read out these passages because this is like written and I can see all the open quotation marks and closed quotation marks that signify a conversation, but it's a little bit harder to read it out. But anyways, let me repeat that. Why does the wicked man revile God? Why does he say to himself, he won't call me to account? But you, God, see the trouble of the afflicted. You consider their grief and take it in hand. The victims commit themselves to you. You are the helper of the fatherless. Break the arm of the wicked man. Call the evildoer to account for his wickedness that would otherwise not be found out. So I just want to chime in again. I can't help it. I just want to chime in and say that this is actually a prayer. This is a petition to God. It's a prayer to God. And for those of you guys who relate, please pray along with me. You know, if you're open to praying, like this is my prayer as well. Like for so much of my life, I actually pray, or at least so much of my recent years, you know, having gone through so much trauma, seen so much evil, experienced so much evil in the world, and seeing the wicked persist in their harms towards others, this is a prayer that we can pray. And I do believe in the power of prayer. I do believe that God listens to prayers. And if it's his will, he does honor those prayers. So, verse 15, break the arm of the wicked man. Call the evildoer to account for his wickedness that would otherwise not be found out. And chiming in again, this is a prayer to God. This is the psalmist speaking to God. Break the arm of the wicked man. Call the evildoer to account for his wickedness that would not otherwise be found out. And then verse 16, the Lord is king forever and ever. The nations will perish from his land. You, Lord, hear the desire of the afflicted. You encourage them and you listen to their cry, defending the fatherless and the oppressed, so that mere earthly mortals will never again strike terror. So that is Psalm 10 from the Bible. And now I'm going to read Psalm 12. And this psalm is also about the evil and wickedness in the world, the rampant harms that happen in the world, and how it's so traumatizing to not have a safe place in the world, people you can trust. I find it quite a validating psalm. So, Psalm 12. And again, I'm reading from the NIV version. And this is a psalm of David. Help, Lord, for no one is faithful anymore. Those who are loyal have vanished from the human race. Everyone lies to their neighbor. They flatter with their lips, but harbor deception in their hearts. May the Lord silence all flattering lips and every boastful tongue. Those who say, by our tongues we will prevail, our own lips will defend us. Who is Lord over us? Verse 5, and this is God speaking, by the way, just chiming in, because there's an open quotation mark that you guys can't see. So yeah, this is God speaking in verse 5. Because the poor are plundered and the needy groan, I will now arise, says the Lord. I will protect them from those who malign them. And then just to chime in, that's where the quotation marks close. Verse 6, and the words of the Lord are flawless, like silver purified in a crucible, like gold refined 7 times. You, Lord, will keep the needy safe and will protect us forever from the wicked, who freely strut about when what is vile is honored by the human race. I think that's quite powerful. I'm going to read that again, verses 7 to 8. You, Lord, will keep the needy safe and will protect us forever from the wicked, who freely strut about when what is vile is honored by the human race. And so I hope that me reading these Psalms, which are ancient texts of old, will help some of us feel less alone in our experiences and in our emotions and our feelings, in our lived realities and the things that we've observed, experienced. Yeah. I'll read one more psalm because this video is getting a bit long and I'm at the 35-minute mark now. So I'll read one last psalm, and this is Psalm 37. It's mainly to comfort some of you guys and maybe provide some direction as well. This is one of my favorite psalms in the Bible, by the way. It's also a psalm of David, meaning David wrote it. And David is one of the biblical characters, King David. I'm guessing there are a lot of Christian shows about this character, like David, and I'm also guessing that they botch his character and butcher his character, as many Christian movies and shows do. I personally do not ever recommend watching The Chosen. That's just my personal advice for anyone here who has ever thought about it. I personally do not recommend it. I think it can be very harmful to portray characters incorrectly or inaccurately, and most of these shows do that, and not even just the extreme creative liberties that they take, but just the way they portray people and their character and personalities, the way they portray Jesus or the apostles, like it might not actually be accurate, and what I'm concerned about is that there's a good chance that these characters were actually more loving and normal in real life than how they're portrayed on the screen. Like a lot of actors and stuff, like if they're not a particularly loving person themselves, or as a human being, like maybe because the world has gotten cold and whatever, and they're just distant from love, like for whatever reason, right? If they are not able to portray the character of a deeply loving person, it just won't do these characters justice. But anyways, I'm going to be reading Psalm 37, which is a psalm of David. Do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong. For like the grass, they will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evil. For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. A little while, and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. But the meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity. The wicked plot against the righteous and gnash their teeth at them. But the Lord laughs at the wicked, for he knows their day is coming. The wicked draw the sword and bend the bow. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry, guys. I am not doing this justice. The wicked draw the sword and bend the bow. I'm not sure why I got tripped up there. I'm not sure why I even thought of the word bow, which is like the action of bowing. Anyways, back to the verse. The wicked draw the sword and bend the bow to bring down the poor and needy, to slay those whose ways are upright. But their swords will pierce their own hearts, and their bows will be broken. Better the little that the righteous have than the wealth of many wicked. For the power of the wicked will be broken, but the Lord upholds the righteous. The blameless spend their days under the Lord's care, and their inheritance will endure forever. In times of disaster they will not wither. In days of famine they will enjoy plenty. But the wicked will perish. So the Lord's enemies are like the flowers of the field. They will be consumed. They will go up in smoke. The wicked borrow and do not repay, but the righteous give generously. Those the Lord blesses will inherit the land, but those he curses will be destroyed. And guys, I just want to chime in here because I need to make a very important disclaimer or caveat that there are a lot of concepts in the Bible that have a tension, meaning that they are true in some instances, but not true in other instances. There's a tension. So they are true, but not every single instance is going to be like that. And so for many of us, right, we have suffered unjustly, we've been destroyed and all of that, and in no way is this passage saying that we have earned it or we deserve it. No. There are many other parts of the Bible that address this. For example, the book of Job, which is on suffering, and how even the righteous suffer unjustly, unfairly. And we live in a world where it's not always like you do good and then good comes back to you. You do bad and then bad comes back to you. So although those things happen, as in doing good and good coming back to you, doing bad and bad coming back to you, kind of reaping what you're sowing, which is a biblical concept of, reaping what you sow, and God rewarding the righteous and God punishing the wicked, it does happen even in this earthly life, and not only, in what comes after death, but although those truths do hold up in reality, there are also other truths that are more nuanced and account for the suffering and destruction of people who don't deserve it. And there are many other parts of the Bible that do address those things. And so I just want to chime in and clarify that, because I don't want any of these scriptures to cause any harm to people because of them being, mishandled or not properly taught with nuance. So anyways, going on to the next verse 21, the wicked borrow... Oh wait, hang on, I've already read that. Okay, I've already read that. I'll move on to verse 23, which is where I left off. The Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in him. Though he may stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. I was young and now I am old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging bread. They are always generous and lend freely. Their children will be a blessing. Turn from evil and do good, then you will dwell in the land forever. For the Lord loves the just and will not forsake his faithful ones. Wrongdoers will be completely destroyed. The offspring of the wicked will perish. The righteous will inherit the land and dwell in it forever. The mouths of the righteous utter wisdom, and their tongues speak what is just. The law of their God is in their hearts, their feet do not slip. The wicked lie in wait for the righteous, intent on putting them to death. But the Lord will not leave them in the power of the wicked, or let them be condemned when brought to trial. And guys, I just want to chime in again, not to teach, but just to make an important clarification and disclaimer as well, that a couple verses above I said that the wrongdoers will be completely destroyed, the offspring of the wicked will perish. I do want to clarify though that there's also nuance to that. So it's not good. Please don't despair and think that, oh gosh, like my parents were wicked people or evil people, and that means that God is now against me and he's going to destroy me. No. There are many parts of the Bible, for example, in the Old Testament, where there were a series of wicked kings, right? But every now and then, one of those kings would have an offspring who was a good child, like a decently righteous person. And God had favor on those people and loved them. So it's not a case of, oh, if you're wicked, then your offspring are immediately hated by God and God is against them. No, that's not the case. There are many instances in the Bible where that's not true, where the parent was a genuinely like horrific, wicked person, and then the offspring was a righteous person, and God favored and loved the offspring. So just want to clarify that. Okay, so moving on to the next verse, and this psalm is about to end. Verse 34, hope in the Lord and keep his way. He will exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are destroyed, you will see it. I have seen a wicked and ruthless man flourishing like a luxuriant native tree, but he soon passed away and was no more. Though I looked for him, he could not be found. Consider the blameless, observe the upright. A future awaits those who seek peace. But all sinners will be destroyed. There will be no future for the wicked. The salvation of the righteous comes from the Lord. He is their stronghold in time of trouble. The Lord helps them and delivers them. He delivers them from the wicked and saves them because they take refuge in him. And I also want to say that, again, this is just one facet of the truth. So if I read some things and at some point you're like, but that's not true, that's not matching up with my lived experience and this reality in the world, don't worry, because I'm probably also like aware of the same things as I was reading them. It's just that these are just like one part of the truth, but they're still true. And there are instances in life where there is this sort of divine justice, but there are also many books that account for the lack of it. And I mean, one of the passages that I read at the beginning of my scripture reading this video was Ecclesiastes 4, which talked about the oppressed and those who have no comforter, and that was a pretty intense passage reflecting the brutal nature of this life. And I think I'll end off with one more, just to bring some more nuance after reading Psalm 37. It's something about how, like, I'm actually like Googling it right now, about how the wicked, let's see. Is it Ecclesiastes 8? Let me see. It's about like wicked people being given yes, okay, Ecclesiastes 8. I'll just read that to bring some balance to Psalm 37. And then after this, I will end today's video. I have more videos if you guys want to check that out. Okay, Ecclesiastes 8 verses... Okay, 9 to 16. Alright, I think this will be quite validating for people as well, because it captures a reality that we often witness in the world. Verse 9. All this I saw as I applied my mind to everything that is done under the sun. There is a time when a man lords it over others to his own hurt. Then too I saw the wicked buried, those who used to come and go from the holy place and receive praise in the city where they did this. This too is meaningless. Okay, wait, I'll admit that as I read that, I didn't fully understand. Like, I think the version that I read previously was like a different version. But I'll just read it one more time for my own understanding. Then too I saw the wicked buried, those who used to come and go from the holy place and receive praise in the city where they did this. This too is meaningless. So yeah, my understanding in the past was that, like, wicked people were wicked and then they were receiving praise. And that kind of injustice. Actually, let me find the NLT version of that. Ecclesiastes 8 verse 10. And I'll use the New Living Translation, which is a pretty reliable translation by, was it Crossway or no? I forgot what it was, but it was like one of the reputable. It might be Crossway actually, or another one. Okay, it might be another one, but like a pretty reputable translation. So, yeah, okay, this makes sense. I have seen wicked people buried with honor. Yet they were the very ones who frequented the temple and are now praised in the same city where they committed their crimes. This too is meaningless. So the NLT version tries to get the meaning across in a more like clearer way that is easier to understand. And yeah, I think that this captures such a vexing reality. I have seen wicked people buried with honor, yet they were the very ones who frequented the temple and are now praised in the same city where they committed their crimes. This too is meaningless. Okay, but going back to the NIV version, I'll continue reading from the verse that I stopped at. Verse 11. When the sentence for a crime is not quickly carried out, people's hearts are filled with schemes to do wrong. Although a wicked person who commits 100 crimes may live a long time, I know that it will go better with those who fear God, who are reverent before Him. Yet, because the wicked do not fear God, it will not go well with them, and their days will not lengthen like a shadow. There is something else meaningless that occurs on earth. The righteous who get what the wicked deserve, and the wicked who get what the righteous deserve. This too, I say, is meaningless. So I commend the enjoyment of life, because there is nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. Then joy will accompany them in their toil all the days of the life God has given them under the sun. When I applied my mind to know wisdom and to observe the labor that is done on earth, people getting no sleep day or night, then I saw all that God has done. No one can comprehend what goes on under the sun. Despite all their efforts to search it out, no one can discover its meaning. Even if the wise claim they know, they cannot really comprehend it. That's Ecclesiastes 8 for you guys, one of the more philosophical books of the Bible, if not the most. Yeah. I hope that all of my scripture readings have helped some people to feel more validated, to process some of the awfulness in this world. And there's so much more, to be honest. The Bible is bursting with content that has to do with this topic of suffering. But again, I'm almost at my 1 hour mark. Actually, I'm at 55 minutes now. So I might as well just read a couple more. I don't know. Should I? Maybe I'll just read one more. Psalm 18. This is one that has helped me today, actually, like in a time of distress, and I hope that encourages some of you guys. Okay, so this one's more personal for me, but I'll just share this with you guys. And since I'm almost at the 1 hour mark, I might as well just exactly reach the 1 hour mark. So Psalm 18. And I'm just gonna read the description. It says, "For the director of music, of David, the servant of the Lord, he sang to the Lord the words of this song when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. He said, I love you, Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I called to the Lord who is worthy of praise, and I have been saved from my enemies. The cords of death entangled me. The torrents of destruction overwhelmed me. The cords of the grave coiled around me. The snares of death confronted me. In my distress, I called to the Lord. I cried to my God for help. From his temple he heard my voice. My cry came before him into his ears. The earth trembled and quaked, and the foundations of the mountains shook. They trembled because he was angry. Smoke rose from his nostrils, consuming fire came from his mouth, burning coals blazed out of it. He parted the heavens and came down. Dark clouds were under his feet. And guys, I'm just gonna chime in and make a quick disclaimer. He's not angry at the psalmist. He's not angry at the person who's praying to him. He's angry at all the evil and injustice that has caused so much distress to this poor psalmist who is praying. So going back to the passage, the earth trembled and quaked, and the foundations of the mountains shook. They trembled because he was angry. Smoke rose from his nostrils, consuming fire came from his mouth. Burning coals blazed out of it. He parted the heavens and came down. Dark clouds were under his feet. He mounted the cherubim and flew. He soared on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him, the dark rain clouds of the sky. Out of the brightness of his presence, clouds advanced, with hailstones and bolts of lightning. The Lord thundered from heaven, the voice of the Most High resounded. He shot his arrows and scattered the enemy. With great bolts of lightning he routed them. The valleys of the sea were exposed, and the foundations of the earth laid bare at your rebuke, Lord, at the blast of the breath from your nostrils. He reached down from on high and took hold of me. He drew me out of deep waters. And I just want to chime in there and say how many times I feel like I've been left for dead, left to drown, left to fend for myself by other people who could have helped me but did not. They left me to drown. I can tell you so many instances, or pivotal moments in my life where actually I would not have suffered as much as I ended up suffering if the people around me, and some of whom I actually actively reached out to for help, if they had just helped me, and they were capable of helping me, but they did not. They kind of closed their hearts to me, or they just prioritized their own interests over helping me, and just abandoned me in my time of need, or betrayed me even. And again, kind of like going back to the parable of the Good Samaritan, which I think reflects God's heart, because Jesus was the one who told that parable, right? We're told to love our neighbors as ourselves, and the one who loved his neighbor as himself was the Good Samaritan who stopped for the robber, not the first two people who walked past and ignored the man in need in front of them. But yeah, going back to this passage, I wanted to chime in because there have been so many times where I felt like I was left to fend for myself, left to drown. And yeah, I mean, I will say also there have been seasons in my life where I prayed to God and he seemed silent and he did not answer. But I believe that there were reasons for those seasons. They often led to some kind of learning for me, some kind of development in my character, though I still don't fully understand them and I can't claim to. But I just wanted to acknowledge that there have been times where I cried out to God and it seemed like he was silent, did not answer as well. And I am not alone in that experience, because there are some psalms in the Bible that also capture this experience. But in my experience, at least, looking back, I think there were reasons that God was silent in those moments, and they ultimately did lead to me experiencing certain things in life that, as much as they harmed and humiliated me, because I felt like God didn't protect me from them, I actually gained some valuable insight from those experiences, and I became more shrewd, and wise and smart in my dealings with the world, because I wasn't so sheltered and I was exposed to some of those harms. But then again, that's just my own human reasoning. I'm not sure what the actual reality of it was, and I don't want to be presumptuous. So yeah. But I just want to share that, in case any of you guys have also experienced praying to God and then God seemingly not helping at all. And I really want to sympathize with that, and I do sympathize with it. Not that I really want to, but I just want to acknowledge the reality of that is what I meant, because I have also suffered so long and so much, and suffered the consequences of things, and I've asked God to help me in this way and help me in that way, and undo some of the damage that has been done in my life by certain people. And sometimes the answer just seems to be no, or not yet, at least. And I say this like looking at my bed right now, right, with a head full of I don't know, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, definitely about 20 or more strands of hair that have fallen out in just the last 24 hours alone. And some of them are very short, like 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch strands. Like they're of all different lengths. And I could even put a picture here. And that is just from the stress of all the chronic trauma and harm that I have gone through in my life. And yeah, it's really bad. And the continued ongoing isolation in my trauma. Like I have had a community of friends. I reached out to them for support and they just were not able to provide the support that I needed. And they're very preoccupied, with their own commitments in life and pursuits in life, whether their own relationships, their own dreams, their own goals. And for some reason, I'm just not important enough, I guess, to them. Not that they don't care at all, but they just don't care enough to be, truly the good Samaritan, who really went the extra mile, put the injured man on his own donkey, right? Like treated his wounds, brought him to an inn, and then paid for the inn with his own money and own resources, and then asked the innkeeper to take care of him. And yeah, you guys can check out my bedtime story of that parable later on. But I'm going to continue reading where I left off, because I wanted to chime in and talk about how I know that feeling of drowning and being left to drown for myself. But in this case, this is what the psalmist says about God. Verse 16, he reached down from on high and took hold of me. He drew me out of deep waters. He rescued me from my powerful enemy, from my foes who were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my disaster, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. The Lord has dealt with me according to my righteousness. According to the cleanness of my hands, he has rewarded me. For I have kept the ways of the Lord. I am not guilty of turning from my God. All his laws are before me. I have not turned away from his decrees. I have been blameless before him, and I have kept myself from sin. By the way, guys, I just want to chime in and say, at this point, I want to acknowledge not everyone was privileged enough to, number one, have an upbringing with, proper like teaching and guidance and nurture in God's ways, as in his good ways. Many people, even if they grew up in the church or in some kind of Christian family, had their concept of God butchered from a very young age, and were not actually taught, God's ways in a faithful and true and accurate way. And although this passage talks about following God's laws and stuff, right, like actually a lot of God's laws, or all of the laws and prophets according to the Bible, hinge on two of the greatest commandments, which is love God and love your neighbor as yourself. So even the 10 commandments, like do not kill, do not steal, do not lie, right? All those laws are rooted in loving others as yourself. So it's about not harming others. It's about doing right by others and not exploiting other people or cheating other people or harming other people. And so those laws are good, right? So it's not just a legalistic thing here where like, oh yeah, follow God's laws and he'll reward you. No, it's actually following the law of love, right? If you follow God's laws, you're actually following the law of love. And I really don't want to risk like veering to teaching territory, because I'm not qualified to teach at all. Okay, verse 24, the Lord has rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands in his sight. And at this point, I also want to chime in and say that God is also kind. The Bible says, like, it actually has a verse that says, like, God is kind even to the ungrateful. So it's not like super conditional either. I just want to clarify. God is a merciful God, right? Merciful and loving. But he's also just, I will say. And it's good that he's just, because, if someone is committing an injustice, there's usually a victim who is being harmed. So it's good that God is just for the sake of the victim who is being unjustly harmed. Okay, but going back to the passage, verse 25, to the faithful you show yourself faithful, To the blameless, you show yourself blameless. To the pure, you show yourself pure. But to the devious, you show yourself shrewd. You save the humble, but bring low those whose eyes are haughty. You, Lord, keep my lamp burning. My God turns my darkness into light. With your help, I can advance against a troop. With my God, I can scale a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. The Lord's word is flawless. He shields all who take refuge in him. For who is God besides the Lord? And who is the rock except our God? It is God who arms me with strength and keeps my way secure. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He causes me to stand on the heights. He trains my hands for battle. My arms can bend a bow of bronze. You make your saving help my shield, and your right hand sustains me. Your help has made me great. You provide a broad path for my feet so that my ankles do not give way. And I'm going to skip a little bit to the end. Verse 46. The Lord lives. Praise be to my rock. Exalted be God my Savior. He is the God who avenges me, who subdues nations under me, who saves me from my enemies. You exalted me above my foes. From a violent man you rescued me. Therefore I will praise you, Lord, among the nations. I will sing the praises of your name. He gives his king great victories. He shows unfailing love to his anointed, to David and to his descendants forever. So that's Psalm 18, and I think it's a good time for me to end my very long podcast. It's been 1 hour and 13 minutes. I hope to see you guys in my next video. I hope this video gave you guys some good insights that were helpful, comforting, encouraging, and hopefully not triggering. But I also want to acknowledge that, if there's anyone who was triggered by like Christian content in general, like I do genuinely like feel for you guys, because there was a point where I was so religiously traumatized that I couldn't even read the Bible. So I get it, but yeah, I just wanna thank you guys for listening all the way if you did, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Again, I do have a bedtime story reading of the parable of the Good Samaritan, and then at the end of that video there's some like calming music that you can listen to and just like feel safe in a little like safe bubble for a while. Like it's a few minutes long, so you can just kind of listen to that calming music and just feel safe in your own space, like after listening to that bedtime story. So hopefully that will be of help to some people as well. And yeah, see you guys in my next video.